ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। We are in the chapter 13. In the past session, we saw the role of devotion in realization of the self. Devotion is not a ritualistic worship of gods, though those kind of procedural worshipful acts one can maintain the focus. The devotion is mainly to gain a relationship with the self in the form of a personal deity, exclusively surrendering the ego only to gain self-realization or liberation. Devotion is also the faithful pursuit of the teachings from the scriptures or from the teacher, guru, gaining the required clarity about the kshetram, the field, and kshetrajnaha. Also, very assiduously following the values that are prescribed, and that is considered by Bhagavan Krishna as knowledge. Unless we have the devotion to the goal, we will not follow the instructions leading to the goal. Bhagavan Krishna therefore says, knowing the field, knower of the field, knowledge and knowable, my devotees will reach my state. Bhagavan continued to explain what is Purusha or who is Purusha and what is Prakriti. Because one of the three sets of questions asked by Arjuna in the beginning was, what is Purusha and Prakriti? Bhagavan said, both are beginningless. The soul's expression in the body is life. Soul is sentient and the body and the matter are insentient, subject to constant change. So matter is a field through which the self expresses, and both the field as well as the soul, matter and the soul, both are two distinct expressions of the same Lord. One is called higher, another is lower. And the soul is not different from that very source itself. The source is of the nature of consciousness, and the soul also is of the same nature identified, of course, with the Prakriti or the field. All changes that take place, birth, growth, decay, death, dissolution, everything happens with the matter. And matter actually doesn't perish, it only changes its form. Therefore, both are beginningless, both are endless also. Matter is also endless. The soul obviously is endless. But the soul is freed from the identification with the matter, which is what is called liberation. The relationship between Purusha and Prakriti is essentially this. Prakriti, the matter, is the cause and effect. The creation is a chain of events. Even scientific reasoning will tell us that no effect can be without a cause. And Gurudeva always mentioned that effect is nothing but cause in a different form. So, scientifically analyzing, the Sankhyans, the great seers of the Sankhya philosophy, explain to us that Prakriti is of three qualities, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And out of this tamasic quality of the Prakriti came five basic elements: space, air, fire, water and earth. They get grossified, meaning each one of them are capable of accommodating the other four. And out of that very grossification process came the seven higher worlds: Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Suvaha, Mahaha, Janaha, Tapaha, Satyam. And the seven lower worlds: Atala, Vitala, Rasatala, Talatala, Mahatala, Patala. Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Rasatala, Mahatala, Talatala, Patala. Tala means level. And these are all together constitute the 14 worlds in the cosmos. We are living in Bhuhu, the first level high. And above us is another 6 worlds which are higher nature. And below us are 7 lower worlds. Lower, when we say, it is not physically below, but by degree of evolution. Degree of evolution of the beings living there. If you consider Bhumi, earth, as a field, a level, then the 7 lower worlds are those which have living beings and living conditions which are lower by nature. Or, if you do not believe in the existence of the 7 worlds below, then we can say 7 kinds of living beings who have lesser developed consciousness or expression of consciousness. For example, a worm is of a lower level of consciousness than a bird. A bacteria has lower level of consciousness than even a worm. A monkey or a chimpanzee will have a higher level of consciousness than other animals. They are closer to human. So you can consider even the same world itself has got lower levels of existence. Similarly, in this very same world, also we can consider people of higher level of consciousness living, and they are also considered as higher levels of existence. Not only the 14 worlds are created, but the objects to experience are also created out of the 5 elements. The bodies to experience and objects to experience. And out of the sattvic aspect of all the 5 elements together came mind, intellect, memory and ego. And out of the sattvic element of each of the five elements came the five organs of perception. From the space, ears; from the air, the skin; from the fire, the eyes; from the water, the tongue; and from the earth, the nostrils. The ability to smell, hear, taste, etc. Now, from the Rajasic aspect of the five elements, together came five vital organs, vital air: prana, apana, vyana, udana, and samana. These are all necessary for us to have the energy in the body. And the five elements, space, air, water, fire, water, and earth, individually had created five organs of action: speech, hands, feet, anus, and genitals. Now, these are the creations of matter, and Purusha, who is also beginningless, who is none other than the soul, remaining seated in the matter, experiencing the matter. It is the experiencer of joys and sorrows, identifying with the matter. And therefore, this is a relationship between Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the experiencer based upon what he identifies with. Identified with the Prakriti, not only the experience takes place, but also the impressions. The latent impressions based upon the experiences get stored, and based upon the kind of impressions will be the next birth. If the impressions are of the higher quality, then the soul takes the form of gods, who are dwellers in the denizens of the heaven. If the impressions are mixed, Rajas and Tamas and Sattva mixed, then they take the birth of a human. If the impressions are mostly tamasic and rajasic, then their soul will take birth as animals. And in the human existence, or any other existence as well, we do face the world and engage in actions, and action leading to further desires. Desire is the cause for rebirth. Then the impressions are created, and those impressions again will give birth to the next body. This way, samsara continues. Whereas when the Purusha realizes its nature and not identify with the Prakriti, and what is its nature? Pure witness, and one who permits the Prakriti to act on, supporting the Prakriti, not participating, enjoying the Prakriti's presence, not creating impressions, and that is the presence of God in all. And Krishna says, Upadrashta cha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwaraha Paramatmeti cha api yuktaha Dehesmin Purusha Paraha. In this very body itself, the Purusha is Parameshwara. The soul is God, provided the soul is not victim of the Prakriti. Soul is not identified with the Prakriti. Soul is not creating impressions out of the Prakriti's experiences. Now, this knowledge is that which will liberate. So, here, what is that Bhagavan has said so far? Knowledge of the matter, kshetram. Knowledge of the soul, kshetrajna. Knowledge of the values, amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, kshanti, arjavam, this way 20 values that are enumerated by him. Knowledge of the knowable, what is to be known, the self. Knowledge of the individual self, Purusha. Knowledge of the nature which has created everything, Prakriti. If this knowledge of all these 6 of them, Kshetram, Kshetrajna, Jnanam, Jneyam, Purushaha, Prakriti. If the clarity in this knowledge is there, that will liberate a person from the present state of bondage. The absence of discrimination between the matter and the soul is the cause of bondage. If a person who has gone through a dream, and upon waking up, if he is not able to detach oneself from the experience that he had as false, he would be suffering the unreal dream all the time. Because the unreality of the dream should be recognized upon waking up, which is to say that waking is to be understood as real, and dream that he experienced, though experienced, is unreal. If instead, if the person considers the dream experience that he had as real, and what he is now experiencing waking as unreal, then such a person will live in this world all right, but he would be preoccupied with what is unreal, the dream. So also, each one of us, when we recognize that Prakriti, the matter, is not my true nature, it is a constant change, and that alone is causing all experiences through the senses, through the mind, through the intellect, etc. If we do not understand the Prakriti itself is a changing matter, unreal, how can the experiences that I have had out of them will be real then? When we clearly discriminate that, then there would not be any more impressions created out of those experiences. When the impressions have reduced, the freedom is experienced. Freedom is clear for the person who has reduced impressions. So therefore, how do we do this? How do one, after gaining the knowledge about all these things, can become liberated? Recognition of oneself as the soul makes one look at the body, mind, intellect as matter that are subject to change and finally death. And such a person, witnessing the changes taking place continuously in the body and the mind and the intellect, will remain as witness of that and not a victim of it. While living, one prepares for the dawn of wisdom of the knowable self by cultivating the values carefully. When it is said absence of pride, absence of pretentiousness, absence of injury, forgiveness, straightforwardness, purity, many such are given there by Bhagavan Krishna. These are to keep ourselves in the state of sattva. Because rajas and tamas unconsciously will creep into our personality. Why values are important? Because they are closer to the truth. And our mind and intellect, being product of only sattva, will remain in their original state of sattva, unaffected by the influence of rajas and tamas. It is like a cup of water which you picked up from the tap. and you have kept it in front of you on the table, that cup of water is drinkable, all right. But if somebody comes and adds some salt or pepper or sugar to it, obviously you may not like it, because the original water, which is unpolluted, well filtered, does not have any sodium, extra sodium or sugar or any other element to it, is drinkable. But the moment you add something to it, it loses its original taste and nature. Then it is subject to likes and dislikes. In the same way, sattva in its original nature is pure consciousness only. But contaminated by rajas and tamas, it will become a suffering, a bondage. Therefore, values such as absence of pride, unpretentiousness, ahimsa or non-injury, these are all to retain the purity of the sattva. The more we work on these values, more freedom we will experience. For example, if one remains unpretentious, simple, then there is no need for one to behave differently for each other, towards each one. Let us think of this, that I remain unpretentious and I don't project myself as different from who I am. I am not here to impress anybody. I am what I am. I need to act to make others happy about me, feel good about me. No need. When I thus return to simplicity, then my mind is free. It is not preoccupied. It doesn't need to plan. It doesn't need to act falsely. It doesn't need to be superficial. It doesn't need to create any artificiality. So when we realize that all these values are returning to simplicity, returning to sattva, and that is required for the knowledge to dawn. Knowing that as individual self, one has choice to identify or not to identify with the nature that has qualities. By identifying, one is bound, and by not identifying, one becomes free. The quality of nature being constantly of changing, identified with that, I will suffer the change. It is like this. Gurudev used to give the example that there was a monkey in the forest, and which was constantly disturbing everybody and anybody. And everybody the people there went to a sadhu and said that this monkey is so disturbing. What do we do with him? He said that he is disturbing all right. He is disturbed because of its desire. It's a desire that makes the monkey seeking for food is troubling others. So also all of you, the Guru said. Oh, you are comparing us with the monkey? Yes, I am. Look at this, I will show you. Then in front of the monkey, the Guru put a pot with a narrow mouth or a hole. And while the monkey was looking at it, he took a big banana and put inside that pot. And left it next to the monkey. The monkey immediately grabbed that pot and it put its hand into that pot. And as it put the hand inside the pot, it could feel the banana inside. It could not see, but it could feel it. Now it wants to take out the banana. Now the banana being large, and the hole or the mouth of the pot is being narrow, it was not able to pick up the banana and then take out the hand as well. And the desire to eat the banana is so strong, it didn't want to leave it also. So it was struggling because that very banana which it wanted cannot be procured, cannot be taken out. It was holding on to the pot, going here and there, here and there. It was unable to let go. So, looking at that, all of them realized what Guru said was right. When we don't let go, we get caught up. Another story which is very well known is that of a osprey, a bird which picked up a fish from the sea, and with the fish in its hand or leg, it started to fly. And when it started to fly, suddenly he found a lot of other birds started to chase. And it was wondering why they are chasing me. Holding on to that fish, it was flying, and lot of birds around this started to chase all over the place. Slowly the bird realized that it is because of the fish I am holding. They are coming after me not because for me, not they are chasing after me for me, they are chasing after me for the fish I am holding. It at once released the fish and threw it away. As soon as he threw away the fish, all the birds disappeared. In the same way, all our troubles are because of an intense desire for matter. When we understand this, not to identify with those desire caused by fanciful idea about happiness, about the world, about the objects, at once you will be free. This is time and again you can test it with yourself. When you do not want something, that what you do not want will not trouble you. And when you want something very intensely, that which wants you will trouble you. That is a law of the world. So, the freedom is not only while living in this world for such a person who has freed himself from the matter, but also he becomes free from rebirth. Because there are no more impressions left in the mind of such a wise person, and without this impression there cannot be a birth. Free of impressions, free of asanas, he will become free of rebirth as well. Bhagavan Krishna continues to say, to reach this liberation, there are many roads. This is the beauty of Gita. It doesn't emphasize only one path. This flexibility, the universal approach of the Bhagavad Gita is what is very appealing to many people. Liberation is not exclusively by one single method alone. Many of the religious precepts speak of only one method and they do not take into account other possibilities. But Krishna here in this chapter says there are many ways to reach liberation. And he gives broadly 4 of them. Dhyanam, yoga of meditation. Sankhya, yoga of Sankhya. Karma yoga, yoga of action. Then he says yoga of discipline. We will see that. Now, when it comes to dhyanam, it is simply put as withdrawal. A person of meditation is one who is adept and well trained in withdrawal of the mind. From what? Starting from the objects of the world, which are external to oneself, one comes to realize that objects do not demand attention. Objects are objects. It is the senses which are going towards the object, and not the objects are coming to the senses. You see, if there is a sweet in front of me on a table, it is not the sweet coming to me, to my tongue. My tongue, with the help of the hand, is picking up the sweet. This is what is the truth. So, objects are not dictating the senses. The senses are having the drive and desire to experience the objects. Therefore, let us not worry about what objects are around. Withdraw the senses. Detach from the sense activity towards the objects. This is the first step in the path of meditation. That is the reason why when you practice meditation, they say, close your eyes, sit in a solitude, withdraw the mind. Now, from the senses, obviously senses are not independent. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, etc., they are not acting without the mind. The mind is the one which activates those senses, and the activated senses go towards the objects. Therefore, withdrawal of the mind, meaning thoughts to be withdrawn from the senses. I'm sure you might have experienced this in everyday basis, everyday life. You are able to go to sleep only because you are able to withdraw your mind from the senses. Otherwise, you will not be able to go to sleep. Whatever you are seeing a movie maybe, or watching some movie, or hearing some music, reading some book, all that activity, those activities that you are doing with the senses, with the help of the mind, when it comes to the time to sleep, you withdraw from all that. What is withdrawing from what? Objects are withdrawn from the senses, meaning senses are withdrawn from the objects, and mind is withdrawn from the senses. In the same way, in the path of meditation, Shanaihi Shanaihi Uparamet, Bhagavan Krishna had said in 6th chapter. Slowly, slowly withdraw the mind from the senses, and such a withdrawn mind should not be left to itself, because either it get agitated with some old thoughts and memories, or it will fall asleep. Therefore, understanding that the self-consciousness is behind and beyond the mind should withdraw into the continuous thought about the consciousness. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi says, Ajyadaraya srotasa samam sarala chintanam viralataparam. A continuous stream of thoughts about the self in place of thoughts about the senses and the objects should be maintained, and such a person who is able to continuously maintain the thought stream towards consciousness ultimately gets liberated from the world of objects, and such a person will reduce the vasanas, impressions, and thereby he is no more subject to rebirth and gets liberated. This is a path of meditation or yoga of meditation. The next one is Sankhya. In the Sankhyan method of thinking, the individual comes to realize objects are nothing but combination of gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And without those three qualities, the objects do not exist because Prakriti is made of those three qualities. Like, for example, my ears want to listen to some music, and the music can be that which can quieten my mind, that which can agitate my mind, or the music can be that which can create lust and passion in my mind. Food also. Food that can make my body healthy, food that can make my body get activated with a lot of agitation, like spice, etc. Or food can make my body go to exhaustion on delusion, like alcohol. So, everything that the body experiences with the help of the mind are combination of three gunas. Therefore, one comes to realize that me, the one who is experiencing the qualities of the objects through the mind, is different from the qualities. The witnessing self, consciousness, is not a product of qualities, nor does it have any of those three qualities. It is neither sattva, nor tamas or rajas. And knowing that the self is qualityless, guna atita, and while living in this world, identified with that self, one comes to merely become a witness to how the sense organs are in pursuit of sense objects based upon the qualities that are predominant. For example, late part of the day, when the night dawns, all of us would be willing to go to sleep. And that tamas dawns. And that is the nature of matter. It gets exhausted, tired. And so the self, the consciousness which is residing in us, allowing the tamasic nature to take place in the body, to sleep. But the consciousness is awake to witness the tamasic condition of the body or the mind and the intellect. It is not tamasic, it is only witnessing it. Similarly, when we are very active during the day, doing many things, that is the time rajasic nature of the Prakriti in us is present and active and predominant, and consciousness is allowing that to happen. So it is only witnessing and not engaging in. That consciousness, as a mere witness of the activities prompted by the qualities of the Prakriti, is free, is liberated. This is the method of Sankhya. Yoga of action, Karma Yoga. Bhagavan Krishna says, actions dedicated to the Lord, actions that are surrendered and performed with devotion, will purify your mind, make the mind calm and quiet and egoless. And with that calm and quiet mind, which is gained out of doing the actions with devotion, will be ready to gain correct knowledge about the self. And having gained the knowledge about the self, slowly activities get withdrawn. As the desires are less, the actions also will come down. Desires are replaced by devotion. Demand is replaced by dedication. Seeking the worldly fancies are replaced by surrender. And such a mind which has become pure, when it is given knowledge, it will withdraw from the world of action and find its own abidance in the self. This is a path of action. Krishna says there is a path of discipline also. This is a very interesting one. Many of us may not have the access to the knowledge directly. We do not have the required knowledge of the Sanskrit, and we may not have even the books that are required. We are fortunate that people like Swami Chinmayananda and such great masters have brought Gita to us for us to improve. Many of you are probably have gone to Balvihar or Yuvakendra or study group. If you had not gone there, would you know about Gita? Would you know anything about the self? Would you know anything about the Upanishads? So, people like Swami Chinmayananda and many other such gurus, they have given us advice. You may not have to read the entire thing, all various literatures that are available on the subject. Take few of the ideas. And they have given to us in the language which we know, which we can understand, in simple terms. In fact, one of the great masters who lived in the recent past, Nisargadatta Maharaj in Maharashtra, he never read any book. He never touched any book. He was considered as a realized master, and people asked him how and what is the method that he used. He said, very simple. My master, my guru, whom I adored and worshipped as my mentor, he told me only one thing. Constantly remember, I am the self. I am that. That's all you need to do. No other sadhana. No, that guru never told him to go to a temple or do some seva or work. No rituals, no pilgrimages, no dhanam, no study, no reflection, nothing. Just keep thinking about, I am the self. I am the pure self. That's all. He very seriously practiced that for 15 or 20 years. Continuously, day and night, without any break. Ultimately, he said, those 15 or 20 years of my practice with the discipline and following it faithfully, with no question asked, like Shabari did when Matanga Rishi had told her that Rama will come in search of you. Just do your work with a loving devotion to God, everything. In the same way, Nisargadatta Maharaj just followed the instruction given to him by his guru, and he realized. So Krishna says, it is not necessary that you need to do meditation or know about Sankhya or even Karma Yoga, but just listen to your guru or somebody who is doing or saying things which for your benefit, and follow that. That is all you need to do, and you can realize. Or, what do you mean by realization? You can get liberated from the thraldoms of the samsara. And this is why Bhagavan has given varieties of methods, many roads to the one destination, liberation. Now, having explained that, what is the true wisdom that one should gain through this? Bhagavan says, whatever is in this creation is combination of only matter and soul, kshetram and kshetrajna. Why it is so? Because matter without the presence of any living being has no proof of existence. Where there is no one to witness an event, the event did not take place. Or if we come to know later on that such an event took place, it's only our assumption. For example, how the world was created, many theories are there because there was nobody to witness it. Who witnessed the creation of the world? Whether it's a Big Bang or any other. So many theories are there about creation. But who actually knew that this is how it was created? Religions say God has created and He had spoken about it. Whether it's Gita or Bible or Quran or any other such religious texts have explained this is how the creation took place. Who knows? Who witnessed it? Who was there before the creation? Obviously, if somebody has to witness the creation, he should have been there before the creation. So, is it possible for an event to be known without somebody who is conscious about that event? So, there cannot be an existence of matter without being observed by a non-matter. So, all that is there in this creation is nothing but the combination of kshetram, matter, and kshetrajna. And at the same time, life without the matter has no expression or manifestation. Because life is dimensionless. It has no limitation. It has no beginning or end, top or bottom, right or left. It is like space. So obviously, when it has to express through a particular means, it has to limit itself. Like air is everywhere, all right, and you take a balloon and you blow the air into that, then the air is limited. The limitation of the air is because of the structure of the balloon. Air is not limited otherwise. If you make a hole in that balloon, it will immediately get released. So, also the life. Life is nothing but expression of the soul through the matter. And that expression is what we see everywhere. There's a tree, plants, animals, human. So, combination of life, soul's presence, and matter is the vibrant universe. In other words, when we see anything and everything in this world, understand there is the presence of the soul, which is present there to express itself through the matter. Matter also has originated from the same source as that of the soul. Therefore, there is only one that appears as diverse. This we have explained in many, many different occasions. There cannot be a creation of matter by itself. Creation of matter has to be from that which is of the nature of consciousness. And life cannot be, again, would be created out of matter. Life alone begets life. Therefore, there must be only one source from which the soul and the matter, both of them, have to come to manifest. And the one who knows this, he sees that original source as the Lord, remaining equally in everything. And this is wisdom. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavastitam ishwaram. He who sees that one existence equally present in all things comes to know the nature of the Lord as samaha, meaning same. The Lord has no lower and higher beings to divide them or categorize. He says, I am same in all. Based upon the equipments of expression, so will be the differences. He perceives that one who sees the one He perceives the imperishable among the perishable. Vinashyatsu avinashyantam. The life is imperishable, matter is perishable. That he sees very clearly there. He perceives the constant among the inconsistent. Life is constant, not subject to death, and the matter is inconsistent, subject to birth and death. He perceives the immortal among the mortals. He understands the soul is continuing its journey. It does not have an end, so to say, while the body falls down dead, only to become matter again, metamorphosized to become another form, etc. So, continuing on that, what is the fruit of this pursuit? Where do we go from here? Meaning, what is that, what you call it as self-realization? How does a self-realized person live in this world? The final result of the wisdom is self-realization. The entire pursuit of knowing Kshetram, Kshetrajnah, then Purusha, Prakriti, Jnanam, Jneyam, all this. If that final fruit is not explained or even stated, one would say, why am I studying all these things? Seeing the one consistently present in all and identifying oneself with it results in realization of the self, different from the shadow ego. The ego is like a shadow. Like a person who is standing there, his shadow is there next to him. But when you face the light, the shadow will fall behind you. If you turn away from the light, you will face your own shadow. So is it with your higher self and the lower self, the ego. Now ask the question, are you facing the light or turned away from the light? Light being the wisdom, the knowledge. But can the shadow exist without you? Think of the example of the shadow. Can the shadow exist without you? Can the shadow exist without the light? The light is necessary for the shadow to appear, and the shadow is nothing but your false appearance. So, can the shadow ever trouble you? It is there, but it doesn't trouble you. You facing the light will hardly notice that shadow. And should you fight with your shadow that is following you? Those around you will see only your shadow as much as they always see their own. For almost all have turned away from the light. And so they are busy with the shadow personality of theirs, that's called ego. And a person who is egoless will also be seen as a person of ego only by others because they are of the nature of the ego and they are not familiar with the egolessness. So they see your shadow only and not who you are. And all their judgments, all their evaluation about you is about how you walk, how you talk, what you eat, what you like, what you don't like. Shadow is there, but you are not that shadow. You know it. So, living for and following only the shadow, others ignore the self and endlessly suffer. This is the truth. The shadow self called the ego dictate terms to everyone, and each one of them pursuing the shadow, dark shadow only, fight with each other, compete with each other, envious of each other, greedy of each other, likes, dislikes, hatred, love, all and competition, fighting, battle, racism, religion, faith, belief, life, culture, living style, culture, language, region, political ideology, all these belong to the shadow self. Once you turn yourself to that light of consciousness and start facing that light, you hardly notice, you would not notice the shadow anymore because it has fallen behind you. Once the shadow is behind you, it is there for others to see. You don't. And you have nothing to do with it. It is there following you, but you have no more transaction with that. And that is true realization of the self. Ego is there, but not for you, it is for only for others to watch. And if they don't see you and see only the shadow, you are not bothered. Let it be so. I know who I am. That's what Christ said. I am that I am. I know it. And people who follow the shadow, fighting with it, let them do it. And that is a slavery, samsaric existence, and it will continue until they turn towards the light. We'll see more in the next class. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkhabhat Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.